If you want to see your name at the beginning of all of our videos, as well as see exclusive content here on the homestead, please feel free to join our Patreon. Memberships start off at just $1 a month. And as always, thank you for your support.
So I absolutely love 4-H. I love FFA. I love livestock clubs, especially when it comes to incorporating children for the next future generation of farmers and rabbit breeders. So I 100% sell for 4-H. But when I do sell for 4-H, I am very strict on the quality that they get. I want them to not only have showable animals, but I want them to have animals that they're likely to place with, because I want to encourage them in the hobby and get them excited about breeding rabbits. So normally I'll either sell the best of my litter or the second best of my litter to a 4-H kid. Last year we got a reserved grand champion, a grand champion, and a handful of best of breeds when it comes to our mini Rex and 4-H. The 4-H kids did absolutely amazing last year with the mini Rex. And then I also try to support things with like meat pens. And I would even help out a kid with a doe litter project if that's what they wanted to do. Again, the idea is to encourage kids as the next future farmers of America. We've talked about it before though, I don't sell pets. And that's just because I purpose breed for meat and show. And when I did sell for pets a long time ago, it was under a contract where I would get the animals back if anything happened. And to be honest, it's just too much work and too much drama to keep up with people and to remain on the ethical side of breeding for pets in my program. Like, it was just causing me too much stress, so I would just rather sell for meat and show. But if we are looking into my barn when it comes to litters, I would say we probably cull out anywhere from 90 to 95% of the rabbits in a litter. I might sell 2 rabbits a month, and that's on average. You also have to take into consideration I haven't sold a rabbit in 4 months, and I'm coming up on my heavy sales cycle for 4-H and FFA coming up. And then I'll also take a couple of like younger rabbits to shows to sell to other breeders. So I actually don't sell all that many. I often get asked about our byproducts when butchering rabbits. So of course we use the meat to feed ourselves and our dogs, but what do we do with everything else? For the things that are edible for the dogs, so the ears, the hide, the feet, they all get dehydrated into dog treats. Or if I have the time, I will take the hides and I will tan them for sale and projects. It just depends on how much time I have on my hands and how much freezer space I have. I just butchered out 3 rabbits today, and all of those hides are going to dog treats. And when it comes to the internal organs, we have a couple of different options. For the more edible internal organs, such as the heart, the liver, the kidneys, those are all given to the dogs. And for the things that are maybe a little less edible, such as the guts, the lungs, and the stomach, those all go to our chickens. And they'll eat those and turn that into fertilizer and eggs for us. So the whole idea of us raising these rabbits on the homestead is for us to be as sustainable as possible, true, but also to be as close to zero waste as we can. But if y'all were ever curious, that is what we do with our byproducts. When it comes to rabbit manure, there is definitely a market for it, and you can do it either at a commercial setting or you can do it on a smaller scale, like you mentioned, for backyard gardening. The biggest thing I've seen when it comes to a commercial process when collecting manure is getting the solids away from the liquids. So having a collection system where you can collect the urine to one side and the fecal matter to the other to market it. Now, technically, rabbit manure is a cold manure, but marketing as such can be difficult depending on the rules and regulations of the state in which you live. Because rabbit manure falls under the category of fertilizer, there can be some rules and regulations that you might need to exchange to make it more marketable on a commercial setting. And depending on how it's labeled as in hazardous waste, you might need certain kinds of licensing or processing from your state as well. All of it is just a question of your local laws and regulations as well as your state ones. So I suggest digging into it just to see what you can and can't get away with. With that said, I've gone to the farmer's market before with bags of rabbit poo, and it's sold amazingly to backyard gardeners. And it is a great way to offset feed costs. When it comes to breeding your rabbits for the first time, especially when both of your animals are virgin animals, there's a few things to take into consideration. Are they at the proper maturity? Bucks can mature as soon as 4 months, but it could take them much longer to kind of figure out how breeding works. Does are normally mature by age and by size. So for instance, most breeders wait till their animals are a senior weight. I wait until they're at least 90% of their senior weight. And then depending on the breed, I wait till about 6 to 9 months to breed them for the first time. My minis are on the younger side and my meat rabbits on the older side. Velma, that is rude. No ma'am. With that being said, with does that you are looking to breed, you want to make sure that they're showing physical signs of wanting to be bred. You want to make sure that their vent is a dark red or purplish color and that they are susceptible to the buck. Does can be very aggressive towards a buck during breeding if they aren't ready. And you don't want to scar the buck or have the buck get hurt because the doe isn't in the mood. So for first breedings on does and bucks, I'm extremely cautious and I stand right by the cage just in case I need to interfere. If I have a doe that I know is aggressive, I will stand breed them because it's not worth the risk to either of my animals getting hurt to let them breed naturally. Another trick that I have done before is swapping cages overnight, meaning I would put this doe in the buck's cage, I would put the buck in this cage, both separated, but I would let them sit there for the night and kind of marinate on each other's smell. And then another thing that I really like to do with my does is I take them on car rides, and that seems to work really well. There's also the apple cider vinegar trick, and making sure that your does have an adequate amount of light. And then there are just some does that don't like certain bucks, so I might switch out the bucks or I might switch out the does for a buck, because sometimes animals just don't like each other. So if that's an option, that's a good one as well to try. Just taking out the little chunky butts to get their nightly weigh to make sure that they are gaining weight. And look how chunky this guy is. He is just absolutely huge. I love it. This litter is about a week old, and now that they're getting to be about this big, we don't have to worry quite as much as them getting too cold in the nest box. So I'm not obsessively checking them like I normally would. I'll probably just check them at meal times and at lunchtime. Human lunchtime, that is. Here in a week from now, they should, in theory, start opening their eyes, and we should start to see their coats coming in nicer and thicker. If you are looking to show, I highly encourage getting the Standard of Perfection from the ARBA and to learn the standard of your breed and start going through your show stock to seeing if they are actually showable or if they would just be used as brood stock or if you should cull them down. Once you have your stock down to whether or not they are showable, what I suggest doing is going through your animals and asking yourself how they will be beneficial to your program to move forward in the quality. For instance, Penguin is not showable. This is a mini Rex that sits at 5.5 pounds. She is what I consider to be a parts rabbit. And I breed her to a buck that is a true dwarf. So by breeding her to a true dwarf and having her as a false dwarf, I guarantee myself that I don't have peanuts. So I'm using her to better my next generation. Compare that to this little bugger that she is just an all-around great little doe who just won me a best opposite at our last show. And even then, she's not perfect. She's definitely show quality, but she has a bit of improvement I want to do on the top loin. I just combined two words, top line and loin. I want to fill those in a little bit more. Lulu is perfection. We're not even going to argue it. But without the Standard of Perfection, I wouldn't know. It also helps if you can take your animal to competition once you have figured out whether or not they are going to get disqualified. Because the thing is even if they are a DQ, the judge will still give you an opinion on what they think of your rabbit. So even if you couldn't find a standard of perfection and you just wanted to go to show, as long as you have a tattoo in that rabbit's left ear, you can get them registered for a show and you can get an opinion. And I love judges' opinions. I pay them to make me cry. So hopefully that information can kind of get you started and give you an idea of where to go. And good luck. Showing is so much fun and I definitely highly recommend it. So the short answer is no, they don't go and get removed from the cages to be put down for exercise. Their cages are long enough that they can do their natural movements that allow them to exercise to the needs that they would want. So they can binky, they can jump, they can do all of those things. With that being said, the reason we don't take them out of their cages and allow them to just run around somewhere is for biosecurity. I cannot put one rabbit after the other on the ground, especially in the area that we are now, considering that we have an RHVD2 outbreak just right down the road and we have wild rabbits. It's a disease that could decimate my entire barn and kill every single rabbit I have in here within days. Not to mention that rabbits are extremely good at hiding their diseases, even minor ones. So if I were to have a case such as sniffles, I cannot appropriately clean everything to mitigate the risk for biosecurity to just let my rabbits run around. So when they are out of their cage, it's to get weighed or to go to show or in a way that I can sanitize the area to mitigate risks. With that being said, you are also worried about cold. We live in the mountains of Colorado. We are averaging in the mid-teens right now for weather and temperature. Rabbits actually do better in the cold than they do the heat. We get down to negative 22. They are outside year-round. I actually worry more about them in the summer when it comes to things like heat stroke and heat sterility. In fact, right now I have a nest of babies that are about a week old that are doing fantastic. But everything we do is based on mitigations and standard in the field. Because at the end of the day, what is important is the proper care of the rabbits that we own. We want them to be as healthy with as few injuries as possible.
Quail are notorious for being messy eaters and wasting food, and one of the ways we mitigate this on the farm is I just turn their food into soup so it's harder for them to dig it out. And it also helps with hydration. But without this, they'll climb in the bowl and they'll dig the food out and it'll just go everywhere and be wasted. So I really like this option much better.
When it comes to does and pregnancies, there's quite a few things that you can look at. You can try palpating the animal, which is where at 2 weeks gestation, you try to feel for grape-sized lumps in their uterus. Some people are really good at this, some people are really bad at it. I'm kind of mediocre at it. I can feel more the expansion of the uterus than I can individual kits. But some breeders get so good they can feel those individual kits and they can tell you guesstimations on litter size. What I do is I weigh my rabbit around the 2-week mark to see if they have an unusual weight gain. Because normally a large-ish weight gain within 2 weeks normally dictates that the doe is pregnant. But your safest bet when it comes to a rabbit and their pregnancy, if you have planned it, is just to throw a nest box into the cage at day 27 and treat her as if she is pregnant. Now, a doe that is showing late signs of pregnancy, such as nesting and hair pulling, unless it is a false pregnancy, normally dictates that the doe is getting ready to give birth. But I always suggest, again, if you are new to raising rabbits, just treat the doe, if you have bred her, as if she is pregnant until she doesn't give birth past a certain time. For us, if we don't have babies by day 42, then she's not pregnant. I always like to err on the side of caution because it's better to just prepare for a pregnancy and not have babies than a doe having babies on the wire and you miss the opportunity to step in and save those babies. It does happen, but it really sucks. So I had to reorganize the barn because I wanted to take my 3 stack into the garage to put the quail in, because it's really hard to clean the quail cages out right now and it's been very cold. And I don't want the cold compounding onto dirty litter, so I prefer to take them into the garage on wire flooring just for now. Just for the next couple of days until it hits 40 degrees on Monday, and then I can put them back in their original cages. But in moving everything around, I realized I have 6 adult cages open in the rabbitry, which is so weird for me because I never have cages open. And then I also have 6 grow-out cages open. So now I have to decide how fast I want to fill said open cages. And what do I want to fill them with? The obvious answer should be silver foxes or Rex because they're better for a meat program. But this is me we're talking about, so I will probably fill them with way too many mini Rex. Which I'm already above the quota for the amount of mini Rex I'm supposed to have with 6 breeding does, when I'm only supposed to have 4. But it's really excited to have some empty cages going on right now because that does leave open some opportunity for me to keep one of Vanessa's babies if I really like them. But I honestly need to take a hiatus on the mini Rex. I have way too many. But I might be going down in those numbers soon anyway, depending on how Lulu does in this pregnancy and how Cyrax and Velma do at our shows to see if they'll be replacing Sadie. So in theory, I could cut down my mini Rex numbers really quick. I also moved Zeus down a row because I had an extra buck. I also need to technically cull out 2 bucks. And in theory, my spaces for my bucks is limited to 4. But I currently have 4 silver fox bucks. So I'm on the fence of who I should and shouldn't cull. I honestly want to see how Lalo's kits grow out with Vanessa. Because if they are good, then I would want to use him for a couple of our other does. But at the same time, Mr. Zeusy Goosey down there that's running amok, Mr. Man has the potential to have some beautiful kits once he's a bit older. So I gotta figure out which bucks I'm culling, and then I'll have even more spots open. But yeah, I love winter numbers at times. It's nice to cut back. So the closest thing we have to a pet when it comes to our rabbits is Gigi and Strawberry, both of which are my daughters. Gigi is her pet, Strawberry is her show buck. And besides that, we don't have any other pets. Unless you count Daisy, but Daisy is a brood doe I'm using in my Blue-Eyed White program that my sister wants here in the next few years after she's out of college. I'm calling it her gateway bun because I'm trying to convince her to also raise rabbits for show. So I'm letting her pick her favorite one out of my rabbitry so that eventually I'll get her stuck in the hobby too. I swear it's gonna work. I promise I'm gonna get her here. But everything else in the barn is either for brooding or for eating. And the way the breeding program works is I need about 1 rabbit a day to feed the dogs, and then any extra on top of that we would eat as a family. Now note, when it comes to the dogs, they are on raw, yes, but they also do kibble. So the rabbit for them is just extra protein. But what I do is I breed my rabbits in order to put meat in the freezer for those purposes. And then what I'll do is if I have a litter, I might keep 1 or 2 out of that litter to grow past butcher age to see if they're worth keeping within the breeding program. Most of them don't make it to 6 months for keeping, just because they don't surpass their mom or dad depending on if they're a buck or a doe. But I wanted to grow them out. And the reason I do this is we are replacing them as betters of their parents to the standard of perfection put out by the ARBA. My goal is to improve the next generation of rabbits to make them more and more to the standard. If we have an animal in the program, they could stay for a single litter or they can stay up to 7 years. It just depends if they are benefiting the program or not. The does breed up to 4 to 5 years. Because we have a light to moderate schedule, and the bucks can breed their entire lifetime. So as long as they don't have a better son or they are extremely beneficial to the program, they just stay. But after they do have a better or we're done with them, we do butcher them out. I am very keen on not adding to the overpopulation of pets in America, so I'm very specific in my sales. I don't do pet sales. And when I do sell, it's for 4-H projects, or it's to another breeder who wants to improve their own program, or someone who is looking for a new show rabbit. But that's kind of the gist of how it works around here. There's a lot more nuance to it, but that's like the shortened up version. So in previous videos, it was mentioned how soft that little broken black buck was, but he does not compare to a Rex that has proper density and bounce back. This is Daisy, and Daisy is properly furred for a Rex rabbit, meaning she has enough hairs per follicle to allow bounce back of the fur and thickness of the fur. I compared it in a previous video of having fake velvet and real velvet. When moving your hand back over the rabbit, it should not fall back again. It should almost stay standing where it's supposed to be. And when putting your hand into the fur, it should bounce back to its original structure. But Rex fur is special in that the undercoat and the top coat are all the same length, giving Rex furred rabbits this very luxurious feeling, which is different from the Rex in the previous video. All rabbits are technically edible. So you could get a smaller animal like a Dutch or a mini Rex. Your Dutch are going to be about this size. So if you see my hand, that's how big the rabbit is. The question is how efficient do you want it to be? What do you want your meat to bone ratio to be like? And what size carcass do you want? Because all of those factor into whether or not something would be more suitable as a meat rabbit than another breed. So we take Penguin, who's a full-grown adult who sits around 4.5 to 5 pounds. And compare it to a silver fox that finishes out around 10 to 12. Same with the standard Rex here, 10 to 12 pounds. Now compare that size-wise with my hand to the other mini Rex. Your meat breeds are more efficient. They grow larger, faster, they have better meat to bone ratios. So it all just depends on what you're willing to deal with and what you want to do when it comes to size. I'll eat my mini Rex just like I eat my standard Rex. So for our mini Rex, we keep them in their 24 by 24 inch cage with nest box until the babies are outside of the nest box. This limits the stress on mom and having to move out of her cage into a breeder cage. And if you look, not only does she have the space for the box, she has space to move around as well as be on top of the box. My larger breeds, such as Silver Fox, get a 36 by 36 from day 0. And this is the size that the mini Rex move up to once those babies are outside of the nest box. And we have some really cute little Silver Fox babies right now. Once these guys move out of the nest box and they start taking up more room, I have a 5 foot by 5 foot grow out pen and a 10 foot by 10 foot grow out pen. So depending on the size of litters, how mom's doing, I can move them from the 36 by 36 out to the 5 foot by 5 foot. And then also for grow out cages for the mini Rex, I have a 96 inch by 24 inch. And those work really well for grow out cages when it comes to the minis. So for all of my horse people out there, when do you call it for blanketing? Like, I personally will blanket Dallas when it is below 13 degrees, but otherwise she's pretty good to go out in the winter. But also, as you can see, she's not clipped. I do gotta get her brushed off though so I can actually get a blanket onto her, because we're supposed to drop down in the negatives tonight. But yeah, when do y'all blanket? And also, just because I know how people are, I got the snow off of her fast enough to where she's not wet underneath her blanket. My girl is dry. And there she is, all bundled up and warm for the night. So first I want to say, if your first introduction to my rabbit breeding program was What in the Alabama, I am so sorry. I have a lot of new followers that have likely not seen my line breeding series before. But we use a lot of line breeding in my program and it works extremely well for us. And I know that's a very polarizing topic within the rabbit community. But line breeding and inbreeding when it comes to rabbits isn't as problematic as it is in other species. They do very well with a limited gene pool, and we actually have instances where we see more traits that we don't want pop up when we move outside of the line. You'll hear the phrase, lines don't mesh well, and we actually see this quite often. So in most of my lines, you will see an inbreeding coefficient. And when I do bring in an outside line, a lot of times the next generation or so aren't that great. I have to refine them and take out the things that aren't the best within those lines. Now again, with line breeding, where does it become a problem? It becomes a problem when you start seeing things you don't want or don't like within a line. And the thing is that they're already there. It's just the closer you line breed, the more everything is brought to the surface, both good and bad. So for instance, you'll hear a lot of breeders talk about malocclusion or split penis. That will cull an entire line over it. And that's because it's already within the line, and all line breeding did was bring it to the forefront. Now, my whole theory with line breeding is that I will breed the rabbit, not the pedigree. So if I have a pairing that isn't giving me what I want in a line, then I don't breed that pairing again. And that's kind of where it is for me when it comes to like recessive genetic issues. Now we can get into the question of inbreeding depression, which is where we see the reproductive rates of our animals and the survivability of their babies dropping. And we talked about that in one of our rabbit breeding clubs. And I'm actually keeping statistical data within my lines to see how it reflects when it comes to coefficients, just out of curiosity. But again, it's less of a problem in rabbits. Again, for the reasons we spoke about earlier, but also from a timeline. So in the rabbit breeding world, you'll hear breed the best and eat the rest. If there are consequences from a line breeding, we just eat it. Not to mention with how long of a gestational period the rabbits have and how quick they grow out, it's not that big of a deal. Where you'll see a lot of larger livestock animals be pregnant for almost a full year, rabbits are only pregnant for 30 days. And they only take about 2 to 3 months to grow out. So in total, we're looking at 4 to 5 months, and in the grand scheme of things, it's just not that big deal. But again, this topic is very polarizing both in and out of the rabbit world. This is our mini Rex Velma. She is a junior doe and caster in color. At our last competition, she won us a best of variety, best of group. And this is our pairing out of Strawberry and Sadie. This little doe is particularly nice in that shoulder region. She has a very strong shoulder up into a gorgeous high point, but she does just slip off a little bit on that high point into the rear through that loin. But she does have a nice height to depth ratio in that she is as wide as she is tall, and that loin is filling out a bit more with age as she is maturing. She does have a slight pinch in the hindquarters, which we're hoping to rectify by rebreeding her to her father. And as far as her coat goes, she has a beautiful density and nice bounce back. Her ticking is gorgeous on top, but she is a little yellow down in her rings. This is a doe I'm hoping to get a nice litter out of to take to convention next year. Overall, beautiful little doe.